This episode of the Small Business Conversations podcast is sponsored by Nedbank Small Business Services.
This is Small Business Conversations with Akona Machoba, unlocking essential advice, opinions, and key issues that affect South Africa's small business community.
Welcome to yet another edition of the Small Business Conversations podcast. I am your host, Akona Machoba, and thank you once again for choosing this weekly SME show as your preferred platform to delve into the important issues affecting South Africa's small business environment. Now, Black Friday promotional weekend is officially over and Cyber Monday has come and gone. So today or now would be a good as time as any to get a sense of how businesses, particularly small businesses, have enjoyed those hard to come by consumer rands, if at all. As you know, this Black Friday weekend was not off to the best start. You will remember that the country was suddenly plunged into stage 6 load shedding on Friday, which I would imagine would have demotivated some shoppers from going into stores. And then, of course, we know that this year has not been the best year for the consumer, with high interest rates and elevated inflation stealing out of many consumer pockets. So joining me to share some initial insight on the kind of activity observed this past weekend is David Adams. He is the Chief Commercial Officer at Payfast. Payfast is an online payment processing solution provider that in many ways stands right in between businesses and their customers in the transaction process. So this gives them the first-hand insights into payment data and trends in the SME sector. Thanks for joining me on the podcast, David.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure being on the show.
Let's kick it off with first things first. So the big weekend has come and gone. So how did it go, and how did this year's Black Friday transactional activity compare to previous years?
Well, firstly, it went very well, which is the good news. We continue to see growth year on year. So when we look at the numbers this year compared to 2022, we're still seeing double-digit growth when it comes to Black Friday and certainly the entire weekend. I think one noticeable remark probably to make is that one of the trends that continue that we're seeing is it's becoming less of just a Black Friday, but it's becoming more of a Black November, so the period tends to stretch. But overall, all indicators are very positive.
I think that's quite interesting because we did start seeing some promotional activity happening in the beginning of the month. And I wonder if this has anything to do then with the fact that Payfast recorded lower average basket sizes this time around. Yes, you did have that major 620,000 Rand single purchase that you guys recorded, but generally the basket size was smaller this year compared to the previous year. And I'm wondering if that is at all any sign of the consumer kind of cracking under pressure, or if that's just mainly because of a longer promotional period?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. So it's an indication of a few things. I think one, an indication that retailers and certainly SMEs are, if you want to call it, they are lengthening the period of promotions. So it's not necessarily buying, all of your items within a shorter period or shorter window. Making that basket size bigger is one thing. I think the second thing for me is as well that, we've seen that when we look at the product categories, definitely consumers have been very strategic in their purchasing. So there's a lot more strategic buying, so household essentials. There's been planning around purchasing. So that will tend to bring down the basket size as well. So I'd say a few factors playing into that.
So what I'm getting is that consumers aren't necessarily splurging anymore. And then that kind of makes me wonder, is the face of Black Friday changing? Are consumers now just going to start stocking up on essentials to kind of save bucks in future rather than spending maybe on a big TV or that washing machine that they need, or maybe just a cell phone? Things that may be more luxury are kind of falling to the wayside, and people are thinking for future essential purchases and how Black Friday could benefit that?
No, I think it's a combination of the both. I don't think you'll see the luxury purchases falling away, definitely not. If you look at it through the lens of a consumer, right, if I need to buy my luxury goods, but I might as well benefit from strategic purchasing in a period if I'm going to get it at a discounted price as well. So we're still seeing those categories like electronics, high ticket value electronics, etc., being purchased in the period. But the good thing and the positive thing certainly is consumer buying is becoming more informed. consumers becoming more savvy. So I won't just buy my luxury goods, I'll buy some strategic stuff as well. So positive signs from a consumer perspective.
And then what does this mean for SMEs then, David? I mean, before Black Friday, there was quite a few reports on expected sales boost coming from this promotional period. We've also covered it on the pod where it was kind of positioned as the boost that SMEs need to kind of help them get ahead going into the rest of the promotional period, that's Christmas and back to school. What does it mean for them? Did they get any share of this essential buying this time around?
They absolutely have. And I'm very pleased that is the case for the SME community. This period, Black Friday and the period as a whole, yes, it increases, revenue and shopping for the SMEs. But it's also an awesome opportunity for them to showcase their products and for consumers to become aware of these SMEs. And what we've seen in previous years, and I'm sure we're going to see it this year as well, that positive sentiment around and the exposure for the SMEs continues then. So that continues into the festive period, continues into the new year, because suddenly you have consumers that is aware of these SMEs offering specific product categories that they're after. And so they then return to those SMEs to make the purchases. So very good opportunity for SMEs to attract and acquire new consumers and obviously have that repeat purchases from those consumers.
You guys also track payment methods and you look at which payment methods consumers prefer using, what they like and what they're into. And I'm just wondering, in this period now that we're talking about, what trends came up? Do they align with the payment report that you previously put out, I think early in November? Are we seeing that the predictions that were made or the assessments that were made in that report are coming into fruition now? And just speak to us on the alignment there, if at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are seeing that. If I reference that slightly, you would have seen in the report, we spoke about the online payment methods that's used. And that speaks to the fact that, one, when you look at across merchant base, many merchants are offering alternative payment methods. And the report speaks to the fact that there is growing popularity amongst buyers and merchants when it comes to the use of alternative payment methods. To answer your question more specifically, yes, we have seen that somewhat validated over Black Friday and over this period. Some examples, payment methods that are QR driven, stuff like Zapper. We saw something like 60+% growth on Zapper payments by comparison to 2022. Similarly, Scan to Pay, we've seen more than 40% growth in that payment method compared to 2022 as well. So yes, the trend is validated and it's definitely moving that way. And in addition, we see the EFT and the open banking payment methods like Capitec Pay and those growing significantly, the usage of that over the period.
Am I correct to assume that Black Friday has now become an online game and not a physical shopping experience for a lot of customers?
I'd say it's still a combination of the both, but there's definitely a trend towards online, and there are positives associated with that. So you would have seen, you'll notice that many retailers or SMEs, some of the discounts they're offered is localized or restricted to online purchases, right? Which obviously will drive the purchase and the sale online. There's positive in that as well because there's somewhat more accurate or better preparation that can be done by retailers when they're starting to mitigate, the threats of load shedding, as opposed to that in a brick and mortar store. So we do see a combination of factors: discount offering, challenges of load shedding in the physical space, etc., driving more of that popularity around Black Friday and the period to the online space. And again, there's only positive in that because you start to lose the constraints of physical logistics. How many people can I get into a store, right, to be able to buy the stock? Do I have all of the stock in store? So, yeah, it definitely allows for more efficiencies when driving the purchases online.
And then with regards to the types of items that consumers were buying, you did mention essentials, but do you want to just maybe dig deeper into what consumers were liking this time around, kind of products that were liking? I saw a lot of like food items, things that I would not think typically would be a Black Friday buy, but a lot of those were up for sale this time around, which was quite different, and for me kind of put a dampener on the entire Black Friday craze.
Yeah. So we definitely see more diversification in the product lines and product categories. Yes, there has been certainly an increase in products, around the food type items and essentials. But I think also there's a category, as an example, one of the categories that we see and that's really taken off and is becoming more and more popular is around wellness, right? So whether that is buying, wellness products, whether that is buying, hygiene items or healthcare items, those type of things. So that categories is a really did really well over the period, continues to grow, not just in the Black Friday period, but generally when it comes to online sales. But still, as I said earlier, do not take away from the fact that the items like the electronics, those items are still doing very well.
And that 620,000 Rand purchase, do you have any insight on what that particular shopper got for that amount?
I was asked the question earlier. I unfortunately can't disclose that one.
Okay. Maybe a category. Can you just divulge the category that they spent that amount in?
Yeah, it was in luxury goods.
Okay, so luxury is definitely not dead. David, and then just speaking on the load shedding impact on activity, how does that factor into small businesses being able to complete a transaction? I mean, yes, there are these new technological advances in the payment industry and new trends, but what kind of barrier does load shedding put in that kind of space?
Yeah, look, it's very challenging, obviously, for SMEs, and I think when working capital is a challenge for a small business, the impact of load shedding is felt even more. You would have seen in the report that we called out, it was more than 80%, or at least more than 60% of merchants put load shedding down as one of their top 5 challenges. So from an online perspective, I think because SMEs generally work with partners such as ourselves, so during load shedding, we're mitigating that risk. So there's no risk to transaction not being completed, etc. There can be challenges, obviously, when it comes to logistics and shipping, etc. But again, we work with and working with SMEs to mitigate that. A lot of the SMEs as well now is through offerings like working capital or working loans, or in the interest of their business, using such funding to make sure that they can, provision power back up to make sure that it doesn't disrupt their business as well. So there is. But the other point I wanted to speak to as well is the fact that it's not been constrained to a few hours on Black Friday and the promotional period has been lengthened slightly. It means that it somewhat mitigates that unexpected load shedding, because then it would really just cut into a single day. So yeah. But good planning has gone in by the businesses, I must say.
That's lovely to hear, because small businesses do need the support that they can get. Just finally, we know that Black Friday is the initial, the first leg of the promotional season. There's still Christmas coming. We have New Year's, and we also have back to school promotional sales that small businesses can tap into. What would you say are the key takeaways for businesses that they should be considering going into those periods? What lessons should they learn, and what should they focus on?
Yeah, so I'd say small businesses, when we look at some of the data and the statistics, one I'd like to call out is the fact that increase or somewhat diversify your target segment. And I'm going to speak specifically around the fact that we've seen a rapid rise of middle class in the township. So I think there's a big target segment we see a lot of merchants not focusing on the townships or informal economy. So definitely focus on that to broaden your target. I think there's a lot of business to be done there. Find ways or find partners to reach that segment, and whether it's logistics partners, etc., to deliver. Because frankly, locals are shopping local, right? They don't want to spend the time in taxis or traveling around far periods. So focus and target on them, which is great. The second thing is diversify around payment methods. We spoke to the fact that consumers are using different payment methods. So I'd encourage them to get access to the free report and look at some of the prevalent payment methods there. We've seen, as an example, there's significant growth in payment methods aligned to credit. So we saw stuff like MobiCred, where there was a year-on-year increase of like 96%. Products like More Time in excess of 60%. And especially, it's when it is, and you associate those payment methods with specific product categories. If it's back-to-school items, it's consumers are happy to invest. They want to spend on getting that uniform for the children, or getting the back-to-school goodies, or the special gift around Christmas. So I'd say diversify payment methods, target segments, just to really increase your reach.
That right there is PayFast's David Adams giving us a recap on the kind of activity the platform saw during this recent Black Friday sales period, also sharing some insight on the key considerations for businesses going into the Christmas and back to school period. Thank you so much for your time, David.
And thank you very much.
This episode of the Small Business Conversations podcast was sponsored by Nedbank Small Business Services. If you enjoyed this episode, please download the Small Business Conversations podcast on all digital platforms, and don't forget to share our episodes. If you want to contribute to the conversation, you can X me at machoba_a, or you can email us at smepodcast@moneyweb.co.za to share your thoughts and suggestions for future conversations. Until next time, goodbye, and don't forget to support a small business near you.
You've been listening to Small Business Conversations with Akona Machoba. To listen to more Moneyweb podcasts, go to moneyweb.co.za, the Moneyweb app, or your favorite podcast platforms. Moneyweb, your trusted source for business and investment insights.